Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that a company famous for making gaming graphics cards is suddenly worth more than Google. Not just any company, Google. The company behind search, YouTube, Gmail, Android Maps, and much of the internet itself. It sounds impossible. After all, Google is used by billions of people every day. NVIDIA, on the other hand, was known mainly by gamers. Yet somehow this graphics card company became one of the most valuable businesses in human history. And here's the craziest part. NVIDIA didn't get there by building a better search engine. It didn't create a social media platform. It didn't invent the smartphone. Instead, it spent nearly 2 decades quietly building something that most people had never heard of. Then, artificial intelligence arrived. And suddenly, the entire world needed what NVIDIA had been preparing for all along. This is the story of how a struggling startup nearly died, survived against the odds, and eventually became one of the most powerful companies on Earth. But to understand how NVIDIA won the AI revolution, we first need to go back to a time when the company was fighting just to stay alive. Today, Jensen Huang is one of the most respected CEOs in the technology industry. But back in 1993, nobody knew who he was. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't appearing on magazine covers. He was simply an engineer with a vision. Along with Chris Malachowski and Curtis Priem, Huang founded NVIDIA in California. The company's goal was ambitious. They wanted to create powerful graphics processors that could transform the future of computing. At the time, this seemed like a risky idea. The computer industry was still developing rapidly. Many companies were competing for attention, and nobody knew whether advanced graphics would become important enough to support an entire business. The early years were brutal. Several products failed. Revenue was limited. Competition was intense. The founders were burning through cash. According to Jensen Huang, NVIDIA was once only weeks away from running out of money completely. Imagine spending years building a company only to realize that one wrong decision could end everything. That was NVIDIA's reality. Many startups facing those conditions simply disappear. Investors lose confidence. Employees leave. The company shuts down. But NVIDIA somehow survived, and survival gave them another chance, a chance that would eventually change the technology industry forever. In 1999, NVIDIA launched a product called the GeForce 256. At first glance, it looked like just another graphics card, but it was much more than that. NVIDIA called it the world's first GPU, a graphics processing unit. For gamers, this was a huge breakthrough. Games suddenly became more realistic. Characters moved more smoothly. Worlds became larger and more detailed. Developers could create experiences that were previously impossible. As gaming grew throughout the early 2000s, NVIDIA grew alongside it. Millions of gamers wanted the best graphics possible, and NVIDIA became one of the industry's most trusted brands. By this point, many people thought they understood NVIDIA. It was a gaming company. Simple, or so it seemed. Because behind the scenes, NVIDIA's leadership was working on something that had almost nothing to do with gaming, and that secret project would eventually become one of the most important decisions in technology history. By the mid-2000s, NVIDIA was already successful. The gaming business was growing, revenue was improving, investors were happy. Most companies in that position would have focused on protecting their success. But NVIDIA did something different. In 2006, the company launched a platform called CUDA. At first, it didn't look like a major announcement. There were no headlines claiming it would change the future. There were no investors rushing to buy NVIDIA stock because of it. In fact, most people ignored it completely. To understand why CUDA mattered, imagine buying a sports car. Normally, you would use it for driving. Now imagine discovering that the same sports car could also be used to power an entire factory. That is essentially what CUDA did for NVIDIA's graphics cards. Until then, GPUs were mostly used for graphics, gaming, animations, video rendering, visual effects. CUDA allowed developers to use NVIDIA chips for completely different types of work: scientific simulations, complex calculations, machine learning, artificial intelligence. The problem was that almost nobody needed those things at scale in 2006. There was no ChatGPT, there was no AI race, there were no trillion-dollar AI companies. From the outside, CUDA looked like a solution searching for a problem. Many executives at other companies would have abandoned the project. After all, why invest millions of dollars into something that barely anyone uses? But NVIDIA kept going, year after year. Engineers improved the platform, developers learned it, universities started teaching it, researchers began experimenting with it. Without realizing it, NVIDIA was building something much more valuable than a chip. It was building an ecosystem. And ecosystems are incredibly difficult to copy. Anyone can manufacture hardware. Building a worldwide community of developers takes years, sometimes decades. That patience would soon pay off in a way nobody expected. Fast forward to 2012. At the time, artificial intelligence was not a major topic. Most people weren't talking about AI. There were no AI influencers, no AI startups worth hundreds of billions of dollars, no daily discussions about machine learning. But inside research labs, something important was happening. A team of researchers was working on a project called AlexNet. Their goal was simple: teach a computer to recognize images. It sounds normal today. But back then, computers were surprisingly bad at understanding pictures. Humans could instantly recognize a cat, a dog, or a car. Computers struggled. Researchers had been trying to solve this problem for years. Progress was slow, results were disappointing. Then the AlexNet team tried something different. Instead of relying on traditional computing methods, they used NVIDIA GPUs. The results shocked the AI community. Performance improved dramatically. Tasks that previously took enormous amounts of time suddenly became much faster. Researchers around the world began paying attention. A question started spreading throughout the industry. If GPUs could accelerate image recognition this much, what else could they accelerate? The answer turned out to be almost everything: machine learning, neural networks, deep learning, scientific research, data analysis. Suddenly, NVIDIA's hardware was no longer just for gamers, it was becoming a critical tool for researchers and engineers. And because NVIDIA had already spent years building CUDA, developers had an easy way to use those GPUs. The company's earlier gamble was finally starting to make sense. Most people still didn't notice, but the smartest researchers in the world did, and they wanted more NVIDIA hardware, a lot more.
Over the next several years, NVIDIA underwent a transformation. Most consumers still thought of it as a gaming company. But behind the scenes, something very different was happening. Technology companies were buying more GPUs. Universities were buying more GPUs. Researchers were buying more GPUs. Cloud providers were buying more GPUs. Data centers were buying more GPUs. The demand wasn't coming from gamers anymore. It was coming from people building the future of artificial intelligence. This was one of the most important shifts in NVIDIA's history. The company had accidentally positioned itself at the center of a technological revolution. And it happened years before most people even realized a revolution was coming. By the late 2010s, major technology companies were investing heavily in AI research. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta. Every one of them wanted smarter systems, better automation, more powerful machine learning models, and many of those projects relied on NVIDIA hardware. The company wasn't just selling products anymore. It was becoming the infrastructure layer underneath the AI industry. And then came the moment that changed everything. A moment that would push NVIDIA into a completely different league. A moment called ChatGPT. In November 2022, a product called ChatGPT was released to the public. At first, many people thought it was just another chatbot, something interesting to play with for a few minutes. But within days, it became clear that this was different. Millions of users signed up. Students were using it. Businesses were using it. Programmers were using it. Investors were talking about it. The world suddenly realized that artificial intelligence had reached a new level. And when that happened, a massive race began. Google accelerated its AI projects. Microsoft invested heavily in OpenAI. Meta increased AI spending. Amazon expanded its AI infrastructure. Hundreds of startups entered the market. Every company wanted to build AI. Every company wanted to train larger models. Every company wanted to avoid being left behind. But there was one huge problem. Building advanced AI systems requires enormous computing power. And there was one company supplying most of that power. NVIDIA. Imagine a gold rush. Thousands of people rush into the mountains searching for gold. Some succeed, many fail. But one company sells the shovels, pickaxes, and equipment to everyone. That company makes money no matter who finds the gold. That's exactly where NVIDIA found itself. Whether OpenAI won or Google won didn't matter much. Both needed GPUs. Whether Meta succeeded or failed didn't matter much. They still needed GPUs. Whether an AI startup became the next billion-dollar company or disappeared a year later, they still needed GPUs. NVIDIA wasn't betting on a single winner. It was selling tools to the entire industry. And that turned out to be one of the best positions any company could have. Now let's answer the question that brought us here. How did NVIDIA become more valuable than Google? To understand this, we need to compare their positions. Google is one of the greatest companies ever built. Billions of people use its products every day. Search, YouTube, Maps, Android, Gmail, Chrome. Google has become part of daily life for much of the world. But here's the difference. Google creates products. NVIDIA creates infrastructure. Think of it this way. Imagine 10 companies are competing to build the future of AI. Only one might dominate. But all 10 need computing power. And much of that computing power comes from NVIDIA. That creates a very powerful business model. Google must compete. OpenAI must compete. Meta must compete. Microsoft must compete, but NVIDIA benefits from all of them investing billions of dollars into AI. The more competition there is, the more demand there is for NVIDIA's products. As AI spending exploded, NVIDIA's revenue exploded with it. Data center sales surged, profits climbed. Investors began viewing NVIDIA as the backbone of the AI revolution. And that's when its market value started reaching levels that once seemed impossible. For a period of time, NVIDIA became more valuable than Google. A company that many people still associated with gaming had become one of the most important businesses in the world. Most people think NVIDIA's success comes from making powerful chips. But that's only half the story. The real secret is something most people never see. Software. Remember CUDA? The platform NVIDIA launched back in 2006. For nearly 2 decades, developers built tools around it. Researchers learned it. Universities taught it. Companies integrated it into their workflows. As AI became more important, CUDA became more valuable. This created a powerful advantage, because switching to another platform isn't easy. A competitor might create a fast chip, but developers may need to rewrite software. Teams may need retraining. Companies may need to rebuild systems. That takes time, money, and effort. This software ecosystem became one of NVIDIA's strongest defenses. In many ways, CUDA is just as important as the hardware itself. Maybe even more important. Because while chips can eventually be copied, ecosystems are much harder to replace. Of course, no company stays on top forever. And NVIDIA faces serious challenges. Google is building its own AI chips. Amazon is developing custom hardware. Microsoft is investing heavily in AI infrastructure. AMD continues improving its products. New competitors appear every year. Governments are paying closer attention to advanced semiconductor technology. Supply chain risks remain, and some investors worry about a possible AI bubble. What happens if companies suddenly reduce AI spending? What happens if demand slows? What happens if a competitor creates something better? These are real questions, and nobody knows exactly how the future will unfold. But one thing is clear. NVIDIA currently has a massive head start. A head start built over decades. Not months, not years. Decades. That makes it difficult to challenge. Not impossible, but difficult. Today, artificial intelligence is still in its early stages. Companies are investing hundreds of billions of dollars. New AI products appear almost every week. Governments are developing AI strategies. Entire industries are being transformed. And behind much of this activity is NVIDIA. Its technology powers research labs, data centers, cloud platforms, startups, and some of the most advanced AI systems ever created. The company that once struggled to survive now sits at the center of one of the biggest technological shifts in history. And many experts believe the AI revolution is only beginning. If that's true, NVIDIA may continue playing a critical role for years to come. The story of NVIDIA isn't really about graphics cards. It's about preparation. While the world focused on gaming, NVIDIA was building tools for a future that hadn't arrived yet. While others chased short-term opportunities, NVIDIA spent years investing in technology that seemed unnecessary. And when artificial intelligence finally exploded, the company was ready. That's why NVIDIA became more valuable than Google. Not because it moved faster when the opportunity appeared, but because it spent decades preparing before anyone else realized the opportunity existed. The next time you hear about ChatGPT, Gemini, AI startups, or billion-dollar data centers, remember this. Behind many of those headlines is a company that quietly spent 20 years building the foundation of the AI age. And perhaps the most surprising part of the story is this. We may still be watching the beginning. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more business stories, technology breakdowns, startup success stories, and deep dives into the companies shaping our future. Because sometimes the biggest winners aren't the companies everyone is talking about today. They're the companies preparing for tomorrow.